So today's episode comes to you courtesy of Keith, who's been supporting this channel as a Golden Pig tier patron. I truly couldn't do this without the support from amazing patrons like Keith, so again, Keith, thank you so much. And for the personalized deck tag, Keith chose Kumena, Tyrant of Orazca as Merfolk Tribal, leaning into tap-untap shenanigans. Kumena is a 2/4 Merfolk shaman that costs 1 green-blue. He has tap and untap Merfolk you control. Kumena, Tyrant of Orazca can't be blocked this turn. Tap 3 untap Merfolk you control, draw a card. And tap 5 untap Merfolk you control, put a +1 counter on each Merfolk you control. So Kumena can make a lot of the Merfolk that you have on the battlefield. Most importantly, you can utilize your Merfolk in a very effective way to draw a lot of cards throughout the game, and yes, also to make your Merfolk army massive. And the more Merfolk you get into play, the more you can take advantage of these abilities, and of course you can take even more advantage of them by being able to untap your creatures to activate again. Now before we jump into the cards, I just want to mention that every single card in this deck outside the commander is less than $1, so it's a very budget-friendly deck. On top of that, if you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out the deck list link in the description below. And while going through the cards, I'm going to be breaking this deck down into different tactics to show you how this deck works and how we're going to win with it. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble. Yeah, I am really enjoying saying that again. Now this is finally budget again. Pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it to get a basic land into play tapped. Here's hoping this card stays budget for quite some time. Anyways, of course, since we're in green, we've got access to plenty of fantastic ramp spells, including Cultivate, Grow from the Ashes, Simic Signet, Fauna Fertility, Scourge Tribe Elder, Rampant Growth, Edge of Autumn, and Search for Tomorrow. And on top of ramp, we actually have some other ways to help us with our mana with cards like Stonybrook Banneret and Kiora's Follower. Stonybrook Banneret is a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard with Island Walk that says Merfolk spells and wizard spells you play cost 1 less to play. So this can save us on a lot of our Merfolk spells throughout the game. And then Kiora's Follower has tap untapping another target permanent. So obviously we can untap other creatures with this if we want, or we can untap a land to ramp us further. But speaking of untapping, let's talk about some cards that can really help us untap as well with cards like Vitalize, Dramatic Reversal, and Breaking Wave. Vitalize is a very simple card. It's an instant for a green that says untap all creatures you control. Again, this card might be simple, but it can be very effective with this commander, allowing us to untap all of our creatures so that we can utilize them again for our commander's abilities. Speaking of which, there's Dramatic Reversal, which says untap all non-land permanents you control, so again, this is going to count our creatures. Moving on, there's Breaking Wave, which you can cast at instant speed if you pay 2 more for it, and it says untap all tap creatures and tap all untap creatures. So not only can this untap all of our creatures so we can utilize our commander's ability again, or, we can utilize our creatures to swing out, most likely because we're going to be tapping down our opponent's creatures, so they're going to be wide open. Next up though, how about some creatures that can help us untap as well with Riptide Chronologist and Great Oak Guardian. Riptide Chronologist has pay a blue and sacrifice it, untap all creatures of the type of your choice. And then Great Oak Guardian is a 4/5 with flash and reach that says when it enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn, untap them. So this can pump our team on top of untapping them all at once. But in this deck, there is one card that in my opinion stands above the rest, and that is the Golden Pig of this deck, which is the #1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Murkfiend Leech. It's a 4/4 that says other green creatures you control get ++1, other blue creatures you control get ++1, and most importantly, untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So yes, this can be a great anthem for our Merfolk, but more importantly, this helps us untap all of our creatures on our opponent's turns. So that means we can utilize our commander's abilities again and again and again. We can draw a ton of cards thanks to this, or we can pump our army to make them absolutely massive. I mean, this card is just absolutely incredible with our Merfolk army. So for all those reasons, yeah, this is a great card in this deck and definitely the Golden Pig. But with that said, let's jump into some of the Merfolk. First up, let's talk about some Merfolk that can help us draw cards like Enclave Cryptologist, Merfolk Looter, and Benthic Biomancer. Enclave Cryptologist has level up for 1 and a blue, tap, draw a card, then discard a card is its level 1 to 2, and level 3+ is tap, draw a card. And then Merfolk Looter has tap, draw a card, then discard a card, and Benthic Biomancer has whenever 1 or more +1 counters are put on Benthic Biomancer, draw a card, then discard a card. So again, by activating our commander's last ability, we can get counters on this and all of our other merfolk as well, and we get to loot with that. Next up, we've got Cold Eye Selkie, which is a 1/1 with Island Walk, and whenever it deals combination to a player, you draw that many cards. So again, the larger that we get this creature with counters, the more damage we dish out, and the more cards we draw. And speaking of damage and drawing, there's Seafloor Oracle, which says whenever a merfolk you control deals combination to a player, draw a card. This can draw us quite a few cards throughout the game, and so can Follow Sage, which has, whenever it becomes tapped, you may draw a card. So now, no matter what we are activating with our commander, we can utilize this to draw even more cards. Moving on, there's Silvergill Adept, which says when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. And then Jade Light Ranger has when it enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again. And exploring basically means that you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes in your hand. Otherwise, you get a counter on this creature, then put that card back or into your graveyard, and then repeat the process. Well, I should say repeat the process once because you explore twice with this. Next up though, there's Sage of the Falls, which says whenever it or another non-human enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Yeah, this can help us loot a lot throughout the game. Next up, Shaman of the Hunt can obviously help us out a lot as well. Draw a card for each creature you control, and you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. And then Bread for the Hunt is an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on deals counter to a player, you may draw a card. Obviously, it's very easy for us to get counters on our creatures with our commanders, so have fun with this. And speaking of having fun, there's Thought Reflection, which says if you draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. So this doubles up all of our card draw, including the card draw from our commander. So yeah, this can really help us out throughout the game. Next up, we also have some merfolk that can help us get some cards back with cards like Shipwrecked Dowser and Salvager of Secrets. Each of these have, when they enter the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And finally, we actually have some merfolk that can help us tutor as well with cards like Forerunner of the Heralds and Marrow Harbinger. When Forerunner enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a merfolk card, reveal it, then shuffle your library for that card on top of it, and whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, you get a counter on Forerunner of the Heralds. And Marrow Harbinger basically has the exact same ETB, but it's a 2/3 with Island Walk, and yeah, won't get the counters, but that's fine. But of course, there are plenty of other fantastic merfolk and merfolk cards for us to talk about. So, of course, we've got Deep Root Waters, which is an enchantment that says whenever you cast a merfolk spell, create a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token with hexproof. Obviously, this can add up a lot throughout the game, and the more and more merfolk that we have in play, the better. So we're also going to be running Aquatic Incursion, which says when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue merfolk creature tokens with hexproof. And we can also pay 3 and a blue to make target merfolk unblockable this turn. Next up, speaking of 2 merfolk, there's Jungleborn Pioneer. When it enters the battlefield, we get a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token with hexproof. So yeah, cards like these can really help us go wider quicker. And we can also grow our army in a different way with cards like Merfolk Sovereign, Merfolk Mistbinder, and Deep Root Elite. Merfolk Sovereign is a 2/2 that has other merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1, and tap target merfolk can't be blocked this turn. And then Merfolk Mistbinder is also a fantastic anthem that says other merfolk you control get +1/+1. Next up, Deep Root Elite says whenever another merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on target merfolk you control. So yeah, with this we can grow a lot of creatures throughout the game, or maybe even just grow one very tall, like, you know, our commander, which again we can make unblockable to hit for a lot. And speaking of growing our creatures, let's talk about Merfolk Skydiver, which is a 1/1 flyer that has when it enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on target creature you control, and by paying 3 green-blue, we proliferate. This can be a great way to get even more counters on our creatures. Speaking of which, Morel the Hulkblade is a 1/4 that has pay green-blue, tap double the number of each kind of counter target artifact, creature, or land. So again, this can help us make a creature, you know, maybe even our commander, incredibly massive, and yeah, can up and hit really hard. But we can also get damage through something like Zagana Utopian Speaker. When it enters the battlefield, if we control another creature with a +1 counter on it, we draw a card. It has pay 4, green, blue, adapt 4, and each creature control a +1 counter on it has trample. Again, it's very easy for this deck to get counters on our creatures, so yeah, our creatures are just basically gonna have trample and this is in play. But now that we talked about our plans, let's talk about some merfolk that can help us throw a wrench into our opponent's plans. First up, we've got Merfolk Trickster, which is a 2/2 with Flash that has, when it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls, it loses all abilities until end of turn. So this can help us take an opponent's creature out of the equation in a lot of situations. And then Harbinger of the Tide says when it enters the battlefield, we can return target tapped creature an opponent controls back to its owner's hand. Next up, Mass Vandal is technically a Merfolk, being a changeling, so it's every creature type, and when it enters the battlefield, we can exile a creature card from our graveyard. If we do, we exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. But of course, we've got plenty of other removal spells like Return to Nature, Unravel the Aether, and Beast Within, which can also help. Return to Nature says choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. So yeah, this is a very flexible card that can help us out in a lot of scenarios. And then Unraveled Aether says, choose target artifact or enchantment, its owner shuffles it into their library. Next up, Beast Within says, destroy target permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. So this can get rid of pretty much anything, and again, giving out a 3/3 is no big deal. Moving on, we've got Tempest Caller, which has, when it enters the battlefield, tap all creatures target opponent controls. This can really help take our opponent's creatures out of the equation when we swing through at them. And then Alchemist Retrieval is a flexible bounce spell. It says, return target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand, but we can cleave it for 1 and a blue to return any target non-land permanent back to its owner's hand. And speaking of bounce spells, there's Aether Gale, which says return 6 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So this can temporarily get rid of a lot of pesky things. Speaking of which, there's River's Rebuke, which says return all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. This can be absolutely devastating to one opponent. And then Flood of Tears is going to bounce every single non-land permanent back to their owner's hands, and if we return 4 more non-token permanents we control this way, we can put a permanent card from our hand right onto the battlefield. Next up, False Floor is going to enter the battlefield tapped, and it says, creatures enter the battlefield tapped, and we can pay 2 and tap it to exile False Floor and exile all untapped creatures, activate only as a sorcery. So this can actually help us out in multiple ways. Again, we've got ways to actually untap our own creatures, and of course we've got ways to tap them with our commander, so we can utilize this to keep our creatures safe and get rid of our opponent's creatures. And speaking of getting rid of our opponent's creatures, we've got Slyn Voda the Rising Deep. It has kicker for 1 and a blue, and it says when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return all creatures to the owner's hands except for Merfolk, Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. So, unless our opponents are each playing Sea Monster Tribal or Merfolk Tribal, we're going to be bouncing all their things. But now that we've talked about ways to throw a wrench into our opponent's plans, let's talk about ways to protect our own. First up, we've got Kopala, Warden of Waves, which is a 2/2 that says, spells your opponents cast that target a Merfolk you control, costs 2 more to cast, and ability your opponents activate that target a Merfolk you control, costs 2 more to activate. So basically, Ward 2. And then Sphaelune of Sea and Sky has indestructible as long as we control at least 2 other Merfolk. When it attacks, we draw a card, and other Merfolk we control have Ward 1. Next up, Swift Warden is a 3/3 with Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, target Merfolk we control gains Hexproof until end of turn. So this Merfolk is great at coming out of nowhere and protecting one of our creatures. Moving on, we've got Swiftfoot Boots, which is going to give a creature Hexproof and haste, and yeah, suiting up our commander with this can be huge. Next up, Inspiring Call is an incredible card in this deck. We're going to draw a card for each creature we control with a +1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Again, our commander is fantastic at getting counters on our creatures, so basically protect your entire Merfolk army and draw a ton of cards in the process. And finally, we also have some counter spells as well, or counter effects I should say, with Curse Catcher, Negate, and Saw It Coming. Curse Catcher has Sacrifice It, counter target instant sorcery spell unless it's control pays 1. Negate's going to counter target non-creature spell, and Saw It Coming can counter any spell, and we can foretell it for 1 and a blue. But now that we've gone through every single non-land card in this deck, let's talk about the price. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, every single card outside the commander, which itself is around $4 or $5, is less than $1. So even with a commander like that is decently expensive, the estimated cost for this deck is still just $32.04. And actually, you can save even more if you've already got the basic lands for this deck, because those basic lands are included at 10 cents a piece for the deck. You might be able to save even more if you buy this deck on TCG Player and utilize heavily played and damaged cards, because of course those cards need a home as well. Though do keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thank you again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support.